introduce y'all to Lisa, and Richard will be joining later. They are two wonderful members of the SF cycling and just general endurance athlete community. They are randonneurs, which she will tell you, I'm sure, more about a little bit in her intro. But they know a lot about fueling and have started this company, Hummingbird Fuels. And today we're going to talk to y'all about the basics of fueling and what that looks like, and hopefully inspire you to take your nutrition more seriously.
Amazing. No, thank you. And thank you all for coming. I know everyone's super busy nowadays, so I really appreciate your time. We're going to make this really nice and an interactive sort of experience. It doesn't have to be overly formal by any means. So as Sid mentioned, and thank you again, Sid, for having us. I'm Lisa Charlebois, and I am the co-founder of Hummingbird Fuels. No surprise with my husband, who's there, but you'll see him in a minute. And my background is in advertising, but we both started doing this thing called randonneuring, which is essentially long distance cycling. And Richard's background, he's a food scientist. So he has a BSc in Human Physiology and then an MSc in Food Science. So he worked at Kraft and Premier Nutrition and all these other companies. And so in our randonneuring adventures, we came up with this idea. It was like, oh my God, like, how are we going to fuel all of these miles? Like, there's just no physical way I can eat enough to get through all this stuff. And so when we were training for this thing called Paris, which is 1,200 kilometers or 750 miles, that's where we came up with Hummingbird Fuel. And then we've been kind of refining it. And, next thing you know, I posted it on Instagram. People asked me to make it. And then bada bing, bada boom, we just said, screw it, let's make it a company. So that's where we are today. So we're about 5 months in, super new. But this year we're going to be training for this Humboldt Randonneurs ride, which is another 750 miles and 45,000 feet of climbing. And then we'll do that in 90 hours. So essentially 4 days. So if you don't want to do triathlon, come on into randonneuring. If you just love sitting on your bike forever. And but getting to the crux of today, and really, I think making this about you and your training. If you take anything away, I think it's this. It's that athletes that fuel well are athletes that finish strong. And we're going to talk a lot about this idea of fueling to the finish, and then what does fueling even mean? Like, just sort of break it all down. So if we talk about, or if we kind of look at where we're going to go, I'm going to try to keep this within the next 45 minutes. But again, we don't have to rush anything if you want to double click on something specific. We're going to talk about our metabolism for just a hot minute, get into carbs 101, talk about the race day or the event day, however you want to contextualize that. Food labels, as much as we all think we know a food label, we're just going to go through some of them just to make sure that we're all clear. And then, of course, Q&A, but I'm going to make the Q&A throughout. And if you can't talk on camera, I get it. You can do something in the chat and we can address it that way too. So it's all good. So when it comes to your metabolism, I'll be honest, this is usually the Richard part of the presentation. So I'm just going to try to channel him as best as I can. But essentially, when you're looking at your muscles, right, and what's going to happen, we're just going to obviously there's glycogen, aka, carbohydrates, your glycogen stores. We're going to talk about that a little bit. You have about 2 hours of glycogen store. Fat, you got a lot of that. I'm not making a value judgment. That's just physically we'll have a lot more fat. The problem is dialing into it, right? You might hear some people being like, I'm a fat adapted athlete. Stuff like that is it's a bold statement to make. Essentially, the two levers that we can really make a difference in tomorrow are oxygen and glucose. And that's glucose is amount of fuel you're going to take in. Oxygen is essentially your training, right? So you can train and increase your FTP. You can do all sorts of different exercises and intervals to make you more efficient with the fuel you have in your body. And then, of course, you can fuel properly. And that comes from the carbohydrates you're going to consume, essentially the nutrition. And then, of course, the sort of fat that you have in your body. So, like I said, we're not going to get too deep on the whole metabolism situation right now. But what we will talk about is just like a little bit of understanding. So glycogen, you hear that a lot. You hear a glycogen window sometimes. That's essentially the energy that's stored in your liver and in your muscles. So when you're carb loading, that's what you're doing. You're increasing the glycogen in your body so that it's going to be available to you when you start your exercise. The problem is that you only have about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. You ever go on a ride? And forgive me, I'm going to speak about ride. When I say ride, I mean exercise, but I'm probably going to just say the word ride a lot. When you go for a ride, or have you gone for a ride, and then about, I don't know, maybe at the end of your Hawk Hill loop, about 20 miles, that's when everything starts to feel really crappy. You're like, oh my God, everything's really hard, or that's the end of your glycogen, right? If you haven't been fueling since the beginning of that ride and you start to feel crappy about 90 minutes to 2 hours later, that's because all of that stored energy in your body is gone. So that's why we eat while we're exercising. It's to keep that energy system high, because if we think about it, that stuff that you're going to tap into right away, you have 90 minutes and then it's gone if you were never going to eat anything, right? Now, fat, of course, that's amazing because we have tons of fat. The problem is that it's really difficult to access when you're going at a higher effort, right? You could probably walk forever, right? But that's because you're going at a very low to moderate effort. So you can access the fat really easily as fuel. And then, of course, carbohydrates, well, that's what we're going to use to fuel all of these efforts. And, but of course, it doesn't come out of thin air. You have to actually consume it, right? So I think this is a better chart to get into that. If you see here, your body is going to burn, this is the amount of fat versus carbohydrate. So if you're going at a relatively low effort, I don't know if anyone speaks in VO2 max, but essentially if you're taking things really, really chill, you can use fat forever, right? There's not going to be a problem. And the second that you start to get into more and more of your VO2 max, using more and more oxygen to move your body, you can see that percentage of fat to carbohydrate starts to really change. And that's why at the end of the day, fueling, this is like a very long walk to make the point that fuel your effort. If you don't fuel your effort, you're going to start to feel really crappy and your performance is going to go down. And I don't know that anyone's like surprised by that fact, but science, even science tells you that this is real. So another way to look at it, and forgive me if any of these things are like confusing, just stop me and let's talk about it because I want to make sure that it's helpful. But if you use a power meter on your bike, maybe you've noticed the watts that you're essentially creating with that effort. 100 watts is a pretty chill bike ride. That's you just hanging out, having a good time. Even at just 100 watts, look at how many calories you're burning and how many carbs you're burning per hour. I think this is a real light bulb moment. At least when I saw this, I was like, holy geez. So whenever you think, oh, well, it's only an hour ride, like I really don't have to fuel, think about the deficit that you're creating with even the smallest amount of that effort. Now, your training, you're getting closer to this 200 watts, right? So now you really got to start to think about your fueling strategy, because at 766 calories or 96 grams an hour, now it's pretty real. And this is where, if you ever bonked before, like this is happening for sure. And this is only an hour. So your half Ironman, I mean, that's what, a 60-mile bike ride? 100 mile? 60, eh? Okay. Yeah, that's not an hour bike ride. That's like a 4-hour bike ride. So right away, and you've already done the swim, like it's game over. So let's put aside the idea of underfueling and being afraid of calories, because if that was ever a problem, hopefully this slide shows you that your body is just dying to get fueled properly because you're putting out some serious effort. Like 300 watts, this is like Tour de France guys, like this is crazy. But the 200 to 100, I'd say that's us working pretty hard. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Maybe some of you are doing 300 watts. I'm just never doing that. So I'm always assuming that it's impossible. But so let's talk a little bit about, so far, actually, before I go on, any questions on anything we've touched on here? Groovy. Okay. Well, stop me if at any point you want to chat about it.
You need carbs. Your brain runs on glucose. For simple cognitive functions.
So there's really no other way to put it. Let's talk about how we're going to take those carbs, right? And when we're going to start to take them and how much and all of the details. So we talked about that glycogen window. When should you start fueling your effort? At the beginning, right at the start, because with that 90 minutes of glycogen stored in your body, if you don't start fueling at the beginning of your effort, you're going to be behind, right? So that glycogen window is going to run out and then you kind of feel really cruddy and then you start to eat and then you feel life again. Well, why would you put yourself through that? You could just start fueling right at the beginning. That's super simple. The other reason why this is going to be really important in your race like scenario, well, I mean, you really want to make sure you're on top of it because after that swim, you don't want to be feeling all glunky and gross. So if you take, whether it's a gel or some sort of fast sort of consumable carbohydrate at the beginning of that event, that start of the event, that's going to help you through the next, 45 minutes or whatever the swim length might take you. So take your carbs right at the beginning of your activity. It will take your body 60 to 90 minutes to digest those carbs. So we're kind of playing with time. If we don't start right there, then the math is mathing here. So, it really does behoove us to sort of stay on top of it. And when do you stop is the next question. Well, you stop at the end. I would finish fuel right to the end of your effort. The other thing that happens here is that when you fuel to the end of your ride or your event, you're going to start the beginning of your recovery. So it's not like all those carbohydrates just like sit in your gut and like, it's going to go back into your body and get you ready, whether it's for the next ride or exercise, like workout, or just the beginning of your recovery from the efforts that you put in. How much should you take? I like to think of this as carbohydrates per hour. It's calories, and we're going to get into that in a bit when we look at food labels. Calories can be a little deceiving because calories can start to come from all sorts of different things, including stuff that might not serve you, like fiber. Like you're not actively using the calories from fiber to help drive your efforts. Carbohydrate is really what we're going to sort of over-index because it's fast. It's going to get to your muscles right away. And that, like in that other chart, when you saw 96 carbs per hour that you were burning, that's why you want to refuel on that because that's what you're using. So whether it's intervals or race day, trying to consume your carbs before the effort is always a good idea. So if you're, doing some sort of interval workout or whatever, you want to take it like, a couple minutes or 5 minutes or something before. This is just good practice, but it's also really difficult to eat when you're breathing really hard. So something to be mindful of. And then the last question that a lot of people ask, they're always like, well, I'm a bigger person. That means I need more. I mean, think of it more as your expenditure of effort and less of your body size. So if you're doing those 300 watts, like we saw in that chart, then yeah, dude, you're definitely going to need more. But if you're doing 100 watts and you weigh 200 pounds, then it doesn't really matter. It's based on the effort that you're expending, not physically you as a human being just sitting here. So any questions on any of this so far? Cool. Okay. So when it comes to sort of maximizing the output of your ride, I mean, Ryan Gosling said it best. Sugar is your friend. This is not the time for a salad or like fiber or other things that might cause a little bit of distress. You really sort of want to start to think about the fastest way of getting those calories in your body. Another thing to think about too is that when you are finishing your, like I mentioned, this whole idea of your recovery starts as soon as your activity stops. When you fuel your ride properly, then you don't have to eat like an asshole when you get home. Like, I don't know if anyone's done that. You get home and you're like everything in my mouth. Like, if you fuel properly, you're actually not, or you probably won't have that response because you feel like satisfied. Sure, you've worked out hard, you did a hard effort, but you're not like eating everything in front of you. So you can have a normal size meal and you can focus on just having a balanced recovery, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and fiber, vegetables, if you feel like it. Sometimes I get it. Sometimes you're not exactly like stoked to have a carrot at the end of this stuff. Do what makes sense. Now, too many carbs, that's also a problem. That's when your stomach is going to start to get really kind of gross and funky. You'll also potentially have the release of insulin, which can be, like insulin spikes and all that sort of stuff. To be clear, when you're exercising, that insulin response isn't something that happens. Like you physically cannot have that response when you are working hard. But you sure as hell can when you're sitting around, right? Like that's when you can have sort of a glucose spike, if you will. But when you're exercising and working hard, the pathway doesn't connect. So when people are like, I can't have all that sugar, it's going to give me diabetes. Well, dude, if you're exercising, yeah, you can. Like it's fine. So the recommendation is, at least from our perspective, if you need to start somewhere with this idea of like carbs per hour, start with 60. 60 is a really simple number. First off, there's 60 minutes in an hour, right? 60 grams an hour. Like it's simple math that you can kind of handle. It would be great if you worked your way up to something like 80 or 90. Now, that takes some practice and some effort, but for race day and big efforts, 60 might not cut it. You might need a little bit more. So how do you sort of get to that number is a good question. There's a lot of things you can do. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of this one, the carb mix drink. I think they're great, but whether you use our product or something else. But I will say, regardless of the products, a carb mix drink is the easiest way to get carbs in your body because you're going to drink. You just will. It's not something you have to think about. Your body's going to say, hey, I'm thirsty, or you're just going to naturally grab your bottle when someone else next to you does. Like we're monkey see, monkey do kind of people. So when you have carbs in your bottle, it's a really simple way to ensure that you don't fall behind on your fueling. Now, doesn't mean you have to use that as a strategy. Gels, a lot of people like those. That's super cool. But even at 60 grams, you're going to need 4 of these gels an hour. And if you're doing a workout of 2 or 3 hours, like that's turning into a lot of product that you're going to have to haul with you, right? And after a while, some of these gels, I'm sure you have experienced this, you start to get a little sloshy and weird, and your teeth are all like gross. And so like it's something to be thoughtful about. Now, candy, cookies, pastries, there's a bajillion other ways you can get the numbers. And I guess the long story short here is that I like the idea of combining stuff because, and I'm just going to talk in the context of cycling. When you're riding, I like to have carbs in my bottle, but I also like to eat something. So in a situation when I want to get closer to like that 80 or 90 grams, I could easily take my Hummingbird Fuels with me, but then I'll throw in a cookie or I'll throw in some candy or I'll eat whatever the heck I feel like it. But that will get me closer to like 80 or 90 an hour. And that means I'm only eating like a handful of Haribos throughout the hour, which is something super easy that I can handle, right? And when you start to look at these other sort of combinations, you can do like a Gatorade. That's totally fine. It doesn't have as many carbs in it, but if you can, get like 2 sort of scoops of it, or add a cookie or some candy or whatever, then you'll get up to 60. But be mindful, I kind of made this 60, and then you see in the far right column the 90 grams. That's what you would have to add on top of it. So I think the gels and like the bananas, like you can see, fueling a ride with bananas is going to be pretty painful. Like that's a lot of bananas to carry. Like all of a sudden, because this is only an hour, by the way. So if you're doing like a 2 or 3 hour ride, well, you need 2 or 3 multiples of this stuff. Like some of it is just not practical, or at least might not be as easy as some of the other options. Thoughts, questions?
I just want to chime in on the liquid carbs part of this, folks. It is very hard to eat 90 grams of carbs, and also I think one thing Lisa maybe mentioned is when you're breathing hard and like really putting an effort in, trying to have enough energy and focus to rip open a gel, eat it, and swallow it is pretty difficult. And yeah, whether or not you use Hummingbird Fuels or something else is totally up to you. But the liquid part of this carb mix has completely changed the game for myself and many other athletes. So highly, highly recommend putting liquid carbs in your drink. It really makes a difference.
Yeah, dude, just like, let's go. Pockets are like exploding. No, thanks, Sid. I mean, there is a practical component to this, and I think that's something that maybe I'm like not underlining, but because like you have to physically get this in your body, and I think especially in a race scenario where you're like, oh my God, I'm focused on performance and this and that. That's where you could really forget to fuel, right? So to be fair, some people, they'll put a whole like 90 grams in a bottle. Like some people just super juice this stuff, and that's all they'll use because it's just the easiest thing and they don't have to think about it. Personally, I'm not down for that, but this guy is. That's what he. This is Richard, everybody. So my coworker. And
hello.
So we're just talking about getting to 90 grams or 80 to 90 and starting at a baseline and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, as Sid mentioned, and we kind of are talking about this idea of carbs in your bottle. It's super simple to eat. It's intuitive. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that when you are trying to get carbs, like when you're eating, you're going to have to drink anyways, right? Just to help digest it and sort of the uptake of whatever you're consuming. So if you're taking carbs in your bottle already, like it's kind of a 2-to-1, right? You've sort of like skipped a whole other step. The other thing that I like here too is that when you sip any sort of carb drink, you can take it in like 5 to 10 gram servings instead of when you take a gel, that's 20 grams right away, right? And some folks can get a little funky gut. Like there's a few reasons why those gels might not sit great with you. And I think one of them is that it's just so much carbohydrate right away that it can kind of get a little funky. Also, sometimes it's just the whole, like the ingredients of it can also be weird. But don't get me wrong. I think gels are great. I would just maybe think about taking it in smaller doses, right? Like you don't have to drink the whole gel right away. Sometimes it can get sticky and gross to take it over, 20 minutes or something. But yeah. And at the end of an event or an end of a hard session, sometimes you don't want to eat. I don't know if anyone's experienced that, but like, it's kind of weird. Like we'll do these big events and the last thing I want to do is eat anything, but at least I know I can drink this and keep going. So if you were doing like a full Ironman and it's like, I don't know, 2 a.m. or whatever some of these people end up at doing, like that's where you're like definitely drinking your carbs because you're just like, bro, I can't even think straight, So anyway, not this group, but maybe something to think about. So the next question becomes, oh yeah. Well, you want to talk about that, Rich?
Yeah, there was something we realized when we went to France, and for the Paris Press Paris and had to buy a bunch of product. We were sort of limited to what was like available, and we bought some power bar gels and realized like halfway through that they had a lot of preservatives, which like wouldn't be a big deal with like a 2-hour ride, but when we're in like hour 90, I just found like they would like burn my tongue, so it was not the best experience.
So so something else that you might think about is like, okay, cool, we got the carbs thing, we got the hour, like carbs per hour, we kind of figured that out. So what about this whole electrolyte conversation, which I think there's a whole lot of companies selling a whole lot of electrolytes, like they're everywhere. So what is an electrolyte? Essentially, it's minerals, right? And the 5 biggies are sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and phosphate. And what do they do? Well, they help with your bone structure, the electrical signaling in your body, and then, of course, controlling the movement of water in your body. Anything else to add there, Rich?
Nope.
Cool. So what I want you to think, despite what big hydration is telling you, I want you to think about fluid replacement and less sodium replacement. Because sodium and chloride, those are the 2 key things that you're going to lose when it comes to sweat. Like you've seen that, right? Where people are like white and gray with like all the sweat coming out of their body. At the end of the day, the sodium that you're going to consume is just your kidneys do everything you need them to do when it comes to regulating the sodium in your body. You don't have to stress about, oh my God, I need a ton of salt. You need an amount of salt, sure, but you don't need to like get crazy with like 1,000 milligrams unless you're like a super, super heavy sweater. At the end of the day, your kidneys are going to regulate the amount of sodium that goes through your body. That's their job. That's why you have them. So all these people that are like freaking out about losing all sorts of different electrolyte and minerals and all this, I mean, that's cool. But at the end of the day, you need some salt and your kidneys to function. And that's it. You're good. Like you can buy all sorts of other stuff if it makes you feel great. But the biology of how the body functions is pretty simple. So at the end of the day, you need sodium and you need chloride.
Can I jump in now? I know you invited me before. I think the key thing to think about in terms of electrolyte replacement, especially sodium and chloride, is you don't really have to think about it. Is just just feel what your body is like asking you to consume, and I think that's the best indicator. So really, as Lisa said, like the sodium in your beverage is basically there to help you, like help with satiety and make you want to drink more. So the key again is fluid replacement. But if you feel like you need salt, then just take it. But don't worry so much about measuring it per hour. Just really focus on listening to your body, because ultimately, like the research currently is showing that you don't need to replace like all the sodium that you lose in one event. If you're doing like a 21-day stage race, then you have to be more cognizant about like salt replacement. But for like a triathlon, even a full triathlon, even the ultra endurance events that we do that last 4 days, it's not as big a deal. Again, because your body has a huge reservoir of salt, of sodium and chloride that's managed very well by the kidneys.
And I mean, so there's a lot of other stuff you can bring too. Like I've done this where I bring these salt sticks. Have you guys seen those before? Yeah, they're super handy. They're like these little, I actually have some sticking around here. Hold please. I got them right here. Okay. These are great. It's like a little chewy circle thing. And if you're at a particularly hot event, I take them with me just because it feels good. And I like kind of get that, like Richard was saying, that feeling where you're like, oh, like I'm starting to feel like I need some salt or some sodium. Sometimes you might feel like you're going to cramp like maybe. That's where these kick in great. But especially here where we live, like you don't need as much sodium as maybe someone in Florida, right? Like we just don't have the climate. It's not 100 degrees. And when you do go into that climate, that's where something like this is super, super helpful, just to sort of give you a little bit of peace of mind. And like, I think the main takeaway is that you can add salt, but you can't take it away. So if you put 1,000 milligrams of salt in your drink and it's 60 degrees out, like, you're stuck, right? Whereas you could pop one or two of these if you felt like you were like, oh geez, I'm starting to feel a little like funky, like it feels like I'm in a cramp or something to that effect. It's easy to pop those. So yeah, so at the end of the day, I would say just be mindful of the sodium levels in your drink. You don't, unless you're like already know yourself and you're like a super heavy sweater and you're like, no, I need like a lot of extra salt because I just know myself, then that's fine. But if at the end of most of your rides or activities, you don't come back looking like a white Casper ghost, then you're probably okay. So any questions here? All right, cool. So then we've trained, we've put in the work. We're now going to go to the start line. Super exciting. A lot of stuff to think about. I think that we've all talked about carb loading and like, how do you do it and all that. I mean, as a rule of thumb, I would say 300 to 500 extra grams of carbohydrate the day, maybe 2 days before, depending on the length of your event. I don't count my calories or measure my macros, but you can kind of imagine, okay, maybe I'll have like an extra bagel and some extra, like, I don't know, pasta or like a larger serving, or you could even drink that carbohydrate drink, right? That's another really easy way to carb load without necessarily like stuffing your gut if you don't feel like eating that much. Sometimes this can be a little tricky, but the main focus is that you're doing this so your glycogen stores are 1,000% fueled. That's the only reason why people talk about carb loading, is so that you're not going into the event at like, oh yeah, I think I'm okay. And it turns out, like, if you think about your body as a battery, you're only like 60% charged, right? So that's what you're going at. The day of the event, we talked about how long it takes for those carbs to upload, right? Like 90 minutes. Ideally, that's when you'd want to have your breakfast, 90 minutes before the event. Now, this is a pain in the ass because now it's like, what are you getting up at 5 a.m, like, to do the thing? Like, oof. So I understand if that's not always available. So you can think about it instead. Maybe on the way to the start line, you take a gel or you do something like that banana or something that's kind of easy to get down. But try your best to fuel as early as you can. And then, like we talked about at the beginning of the event, you start your fueling strategy and you're off to the races. So ride start, fuel right away. The other reason about that is that there can be some unpredictable moments in the race. Like, I don't know if, keep me honest here, but I don't know if there's a surge, right? And you wanted to go with the group or something to that effect. Or maybe you're just feeling super good and you're just like, screw it, I want to like full gas for the first, 20 minutes. I mean, fueling super early will give you that advantage so that if you maybe do miss sort of your next opportunity to take calories in, it's not the end of the world. You've sort of like preloaded a little bit. And then, like I mentioned here, preloading in advance of some of your own race strategy. So if it was a cycling event, you'd want to think about, okay, well, I'm going to drink now because there's a big climb coming up, or I'm going to drink now because maybe there's a really tricky turnaround situation and, like, you don't want to be fumbling with bottles, or, you can sort of figure out with your own best judgment when it makes sense, if you need to fuel a little earlier than you normally would. I like to have you might have done this already too, put a little reminder on your computer. So every 20 minutes it comes up, but it's like, eat something, idiot. Like, that's what mine says, but you can have yours say whatever you want. So yeah, it's nice to have those little like double check.
And then in the case of the triathlon, when you know that the run is coming up and it may be harder to fuel as intensely as when you're on the bike, you could think about potentially like within that last hour of the bike ride to start fueling or even like an hour and 90 minutes before you start the run to start fueling a little more, so that you get those carbohydrates onboarded before you start running. So, and you could actually practice that during training too. I actually do that for my training rides. Lisa mentioned, like, so the whole breakfast thing. If you can't do it within 90 minutes, then don't do it. So for us, when we get up and ride, I practice. So like as soon as we start riding, I actually like overconsume carbs in that first hour to really start onboarding. And that's actually good practice for you as well, because then you can get a feel for what it actually feels like to potentially go a little bit higher than that 90 grams an hour in preparation of the run.
Yeah, and I don't know if I stress that enough, but practicing all this in training, like, I know we're in the race day chapter, but like all of that carbs per hour and getting up to 80 or 90, that's all stuff you do in training, because you kind of want to screw it up there. You sure as hell don't want to screw it up here, right? So use your training opportunities as times for you to kind of experiment with things. Try different products, try different timings, see what works. Maybe something works great on a run, but it's shit on the bike. Like, you kind of got to play around with it a little bit. So I would use every training opportunity as another way to sort of start to dial this stuff in.
And I think just to double down on that, also, like, really before the swim, because I know swimming is well, obviously you can't fuel during the swim, and you want to be really cognizant about like what you fuel beforehand. But I would say practice that as well. So see how much fuel you can onboard prior to the swim, comfortably, obviously, and safely, so that you can get through that swim, so that you're not like in a deficit by the time you get on the bike. Because really, you want to use the bike not to not to complete it, or I guess erase the deficit, but you want to use the bike to fuel the bike as well as pre-fuel some of the run. So again, like, take some of your training swims and practice the fueling strategy you have for that as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's a lot easier for you to be in a pool and cramping and be like, oh, I feel gross, than like out in the ocean. Well, I guess you guys practice in the ocean too. So just be safe wherever you're doing this, please. Something else to be mindful of on the day of the event, right, is that a lot of stuff can happen. And there's a lot of reasons why you probably will forget to fuel at some point. It's a long event too, right? First off, there's excitement. You're just so stoked. Like, you've put all this time and effort into training. You're here, you're doing the thing. Like, there's a lot of that sort of stoke that can happen, but that can also be something that you want to be prepared for, right? So before showing up, like, what are you going to do in the moment when you're really excited and kind of nervous and all of that, where you're going to try to, like I said, reminders on your computer or something to help you, so when you're not consciously thinking about it, you're still going to stay on your plan. I mean, sometimes riding in the pack, I know that you guys can't necessarily draft in a try, but I think there's just sort of that mob mentality that, again, might sort of, I don't know, distract you. The weather, your mood, there's a lot of things that come up that can sort of be challenging to work through. So I would use the opportunities before you get there to really think about the scenarios. And there might be some that aren't written here that are specific for you. Take a moment of reflection and just be like, all right, how am I going to deal with some of the adversity when it happens? Because this isn't an if, it's more of a when. And if you go in with a bit of a plan, then you're prepared, right? So, and again, I if you have maybe a B race that you're doing, you could use that as a little bit of an opportunity to dial this in as well.
And then I think, Lisa, you had an interesting point in a previous session we did, where you talked about mood and how to kind of deal with that. If you remember that?
No.
Okay, so essentially the kind of the vibe was like, there's gonna, at least in this long event, there's going to be a point where you do feel a little bit down, or it feels a little bit tough. At that point, just take the opportunity to take a little bit of fuel. I mean, you may or may not be like under fueled, but it's a really good way to kind of remind yourself that you should be fueling, and more than likely you will start feeling better right away.
Yeah, that's true. So in the long events we do, there's like always a dark moment, and it's usually like 2 a.m. where I'm just like, fuck it, throw the bike away. I don't want to be here. Call an Uber. Like, I'm done. And yeah, it's like, eat something and wait 20 minutes. And 100% of the time, it's because you're hungry. So, like, even on your training rides, I would say take that little piece of insight, because it's always surprising on how, like, I'll usually get really cranky, and then Richard's like, eat something, and then I'm okay. Something else to think about. Sure, some of this is obviously fueling sort of bent, but how do you get faster, right? Like, if you're kind of like, all right, I really want to sharpen the what sword or whatever that saying is. I think that the one thing to think about, well, the four things to think about are fueling all of your efforts. So even if it's a short ride, still go in with your fueling strategy, because the short ride will be more productive and you can get more out of it if you're able to access the energy and the sort of like the VO2 efforts in your body. So a lot of times people go in and they fuel really great on the long rides, but they absolutely suck on the short ones. And those are the ones you actually want to make sure that you're giving yourself all of the advantage, because there's no point in putting in all this time and effort if you can't get the benefits out of the training. So training effectively, I think thinking of your overall training volume, I like to think about it in hours per week personally, because mileage can be a little deceptive. So again, in the context of cycling, like a 20-mile ride in San Francisco is a total different ride than in Florida or somewhere, right? Hills, elevation, all of this, the time is going to be higher, but the mileage might be shorter. So if you're working with other athletes in different geographies and they're like, oh, I did 50 miles and you did 30. Well, they actually might be the same effort, if you will, just because of the terrain being what it is. Fueling recovery, again, fueling doesn't stop the second you're off of the bike or the run or the swim. So fuel right to the end. Try to focus on balanced meals post-workout. And then, of course, sleep. I think all of these amazing, those crazy boots that people put on and all of this stuff, like cold plunge and all this, that's amazing. That's like the top 2% of your like advantage. The rest is basic: eat well and sleep. Like, sleep is the cheapest way that you can give yourself an advantage. If you get 8 hours of sleep every night, oh my God, you're like unstoppable. So some food for thought here. And then the last thing we're going to talk about are food labels. And this is important just because what's written on the label might not actually be what you're getting in your body. There's like a little bit of a dissidence or whatever there. So, Rich, do you want to walk through this one?
So I'm just looking at my phone. It might be easier if you just keep going.
Okay. So
if you don't mind.
That's okay. So we have, in this particular product, we'll call this product X. We have maltodextrin, fructose, pectin, sodium alginate, and sodium chloride, right? Sodium chloride. We know that one. That's our electrolyte. Fantastic. We got it. Maltodextrin and fructose, that's essentially sugar, right? Different types of sugar, but TLDR, sugar. Now, pectin and sodium alginate, that's actually fiber. So what looks like you're getting 39 grams of carbohydrate, actually you're getting 37.4 because you have to subtract the fiber. Remember how I talked about earlier where I was like, if you're eating something with a ton of fiber, that's not exactly helping you work, like it's not giving you the carbohydrate you need to work out. It's calories, but it's not exactly the calories that we're optimizing for. So this product is now like, sure, it's only 1.6 grams, but it's still 1.6 grams less carbs than you thought you were getting. When it comes to this is the one I need your help on, Rich, the glucose and the fructose.
Okay.
Oh, it's total carbs minus fiber minus added sugar. It's 24.4 grams. Okay, well.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is like on a food label in the United States, carbohydrates, includes sugar, added sugar, as well as fiber. And I think Lisa did mention that already, but just be cognizant, like when you're thinking about usable fuel during your ride, you have to subtract any fiber from the total carbohydrates. And then when you're off the bike, you want to start probably increasing your uptake of fiber, just so you're getting a healthy, balanced diet.
So if we look at maybe a different food label that has a little bit more fiber, right? So this one is 43 grams of carbs, and you're like, that's freaking dope. Awesome. But there's already 5 grams of dietary fiber in there, right? So it's not 43, it's actually 38, right? So all of a sudden, it starts to sort of fall apart a little bit, like if we just sort of do the math. So we're looking at 38 grams of carbs, right? Because the fiber can't oxidize during our ride. And the fat is 54 calories, which is good for the zone 2 efforts, but not exactly helping us get to where we need to go. So it's not bad. It's just something to be mindful of. So it's not always the number that you're seeing. And something like this, you're like, well, who gives a shit? It's 5 grams. Like, so what? Well, in your big chart of you trying to get to 90, now all of a sudden, after 4 of these bars, dude, you're like 20 grams short. That's starting to become a real problem, right? So it's something just to be mindful of, and something we bring up just so that it's not sort of like forgotten about, if you will. But anyway. So if we recap everything, we talked about our metabolism. We talked about the idea of carbs per hour. We got a little bit into the race day fueling strategy. And then ultimately we looked at some food labels and sort of tried to like pick apart just some of the different items you should be mindful of. And all of that brings us to the end. But more importantly, to here. And I want to make sure that you folks know that you do have, if you are curious or you'd like to try some carbs in your bottle, you guys have a code on your SF Try Club database. So feel free to take this down, but it's already in your club system and it works forever. So it's not just one time. So knock your socks off. But there you go. So anyways, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Richard. I wanted to ask you all a question about, you talked a lot about like, making sure you're feeling well, but let's say you're off your game. What are some like symptoms that you can like, you can tell from your own body, like, oh, I think I'm not feeling right. Like this is starting to feel like I maybe need something to take in, so that people could like listen to your body and like, okay, this is what I should look out for.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Do you want me to start with that one? So I think Lisa played that Ryan Gosling video.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the first thing that you'll notice is your brain. So I think we talked about it before, but the first thing is going to be your mood. If you start feeling like grumpy or like I'm not enjoying this or this is really hard, then that's probably your brain telling you that it's not happy and it's running a little bit low on fuel. So that's the first. That's the first indicator. So listen to that first. The other ones are, if you get further into a carbohydrate deficit, then you definitely start losing motor function and that. So we don't want to go that far. So essentially, mood.
Yeah. I mean, has anyone bonked? Like, I know I have. And once you do it once, you never want to do that shit again. Like I'm talking spots. Like it's like tunnel, it's closing. So yeah, you don't want to get that deep. Once you're there, it's really hard to get out of it. So but I think the idea of like the crankiness, and you're going to feel your effort. Like if you do use a power meter or a heart rate even, you're going to start to see numbers are going to get weird, right? Because you're just not able to perform. And then you're like, I don't understand. I've done this workout before. I should be doing X. And it's because the engine is like sputtering, because it's got no gas.
I wish I'd seen this like 6 months ago or 9 months ago. I did my first marathon, And when I was training for it during like the long runs and stuff, I remember every time I'd get like past like mile 12 and stuff, I'm like, oh, I'm like really tired. And it gets like mile 17, I'm like, oh my God, like I can barely move right now, and just kind of having to stop it. And all I would have a bar and like a big Gatorade. And then on the day of race day, I was like concerned because I'm like, oh, I didn't even really get past like 21 miles just to test it out. And they had the gels. And first of all, I know they say not to try the gels on your first day, but I did it anyways, and it was totally fine. But the whole entire race, I was like, oh, I feel so good. Like I could keep doing it forever. Yeah, that's what I attributed it to. And I'm like, I wish I just trained with proper fuel the whole time. It would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you'll never do that again. So now you know.
Oh, it's a waste. Total waste.
Oh man, that's awesome. Any other thoughts from the team? Yeah.
I have a question regarding, like, say you're exercising and say you start getting cramps. Is that due to maybe not staying hydrated enough? Like, or is that like a whole list of things it could be?
So I'll start with the hard and fast answer that most scientists will give you is maybe. So there's been a lot of research around cramping and not a lot of definitive answer. So right now, the most likely explanation is basically it's your brain telling your body that it's had enough. So in that case, it could just be too hot and you've been exerting yourself too much and you've been dehydrated, or it could be that you're not fueling enough. It basically is your brain telling you that you're lacking something. So I think Lisa was talking about a plan. So if you know that it's going to be hot, really try to over-index on your drinking so that you can eliminate any of those factors as best as you can. But again, like the whole if you're cramping, it's electrolytes. That there's actually not a lot of science to prove that. So I don't know if that's super helpful, but I think the key is like eat, drink, and if you feel like you want to have salt, then take salt.
And I will say that sometimes cramping too can be like you've done a massive effort and your body ain't ready, right? Like, and that's just like early in the season, we'll do this big bike ride and like I'm pretty much cramping because I'm like, holy shit, we're climbing 10,000 feet and I haven't done anything. Like your body is just not ready for it. So that can also be something if you've really pushed it a little harder than you expected to. Not much you can do in that point. Just pray.
I also hear like people who get those like Charlie horse cramps, like the ones right in your calf, or like your foot starts to cramp up and you're really trying to stretch it out. And everyone's like, oh, you didn't eat enough potassium or you didn't drink enough. And it's like, is that really true? Like, I've always wondered what is the root cause, but I feel like it could be a whole list of something and specifically that person too, maybe.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think you're correct. Everyone has kind of their own thought about like pickle juice or this, that, or anything, but whatever I guess helps them in the past is true for them. But having someone walk by you and say you didn't have enough potassium when you're cramping is not helpful and more than likely not true. So at least you can take solace in that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anything else? Awesome. Well, I'm pretty stoked we did this in 45 minutes.
Yeah, no, this was really good. And I think that
hold on, let's see how I stop this. There we go, stop recording. So